Hey guys, so in this week's episode of Make It with Calvin, I'm going to take you guys through the process of how I prepared and got the files for Ashley from Chip Build's Gazer helmet started. So let's dive into it. So like any good massive project, I did not do the design work on this file. Ashley at Chip Builds is looking at getting a 3D printer in the near future, and I was like, hey, you know what? I would be happy to 3D print some stuff for you. She goes, sure. And one of the items that she dug up was this, and I know it's kind of a large project to start out on, but I've never really done anything like this before. I've always wanted to get into it, but I'm not really that much of a movie buff, so it's a little bit harder to do. But that said, this helmet is also a good foray into print finishing, mostly because it is a larger item. It means that you don't have to worry as much about making all the little parts perfect like on a train model. With something like this, close enough is probably good enough. So let's dive into Mesh Mixer, and I will show you guys the prep work that I did for the file, and then take you over to Simplify 3D and show you how I sliced it, and then take you over to the printer and show you the time lapse of the parts, which took a little while. So here we are obviously in Mesh Mixer. What I've done with the file is ignore this right here. This was an experiment that didn't go anywhere. We're splitting it into more pieces. But what I did with the helmet is I decided that one, the helmet's way too big to print by itself in one piece, and even if it could, the fact that you have this rounded area and this whole area and that whole area that would need support material, that's just asking for disaster, and it would just be an absolute waste of material as well. So I decided it would be smart to chop the model up into a minimum of 2 pieces and go from there. Notice right off the bat that the model is not split perfectly down the middle. There's actually a good reason behind that. The seam line would have gone straight through this detail right here over the ears, and that's just asking for trouble. So I decided that it would be better to put the seam line a little bit ahead of it, and that also leaves room for getting in there and sanding. Whenever possible, leave a little bit of a gap. It makes your life easier when it comes to finishing, so you're not having to sand right up to an edge, things like that. Just, it helps. What I did is I split the model in half using plane cut, and then I came along and drew some approximately 1/8 inch dowel pinholes and located them at 3 locations on the model. I wanted to do more, but because this area on the upper part of the helmet is pretty thin and I wanted to use some pins with some heft, that really wasn't going to work out. So what I did is I located the pins approximately where I wanted them, then I duplicated them in Mesh Mixer and turned off the duplicate, and then did a subtract from the body to the pin. And what that meant is I didn't have to worry about, am I going to get my pinholes lined up perfectly? Anything like that. So that worked out really good. Once I got all the pinholes done, I was then able to export the model. I did send it through the NetFab cloud service though, because doing things like this can cause errors on the model, not only slicing them, but putting pinholes in them. And it's better to do that than not. Now I will point out one problem that I have with this file, which is a little bit of a bummer. I do understand it's partly a keeping it looking authentic, but it's also a little bit of a 3D printing snafu, is on the logo here, on the left side, this part's held in, and then you kind of have this floating in space right here. And this guy's no better because it's kind of floating in space too. So no matter how you orient the helmet, you're always going to have something that's relying on support material to print, which is generally just a bad idea. That done, we can jump on over to Simplify 3D here. And what I did is I set it up so that the model was running at a 0.15 layer height. I've since run some other things in here. 60 millimeters a second printing speed. I was running supports, and I did set it up so the supports were printing every 2 layers, which works out to a 0.3 layer height, which on a 0.4 nozzle is pretty much pushing the limits of it, but it really cut the print time dramatically. The supports though did turn out a little bit iffy in spots because I kept the percentage down to about 10%, and I know that's a little bit of a gamble to make, but at the same time I figured it wasn't a bad idea. These supports are merely there to try and prevent the model's top from just caving in completely. The inside I'm not so worried about. We can hit it with some coarse sandpaper, but I'll probably just put a little bit of filler in there, smooth it, not make it too perfect. It doesn't need to be anything spectacular, that whole thing. So another thing that I did to try and make the model print easier, and I know I'm not using the half I showed in Mesh Mixer, but this is what I had, is I placed it so that the pin side was down. So at least I knew that the dowel pin side would hopefully stay flat on the bed, and that was a good thing. So fingers crossed that worked. I think the Ultimaker literally just stopped. So let me go over there, pull the print out, and I'll be right back with you guys. Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that. And seriously guys, I didn't time it so that would work out like that. So the one thing I will say is right off the bat, I can tell there is an ever so slight bit of warp at the back there. It's a little bit of a bummer, but nothing a little bit of filler can't fill in. So let's pop this guy off the build tack. Oh, love that satisfying sound. Oh my gosh. So there are a little bit of imperfections on the surface here. I'm not exactly sure what caused that. I do know that I did tell Simplify 3D to run along the contour instead of bridging the middle because I didn't want it to knock the supports over. So that may or may not have been an issue, but let me get the supports out of here real quick. Love that sound. So as you can see, the inside, like I said, is not perfect, but really that's not that big of a deal. Wow, that bottom layer is a little scary, but no biggie. So let me take these guys off. Oh yeah. So like I said, this side actually turned out pretty decent. This side though, it could have turned out a little better. I'm actually surprised it turned out as good as it did, considering that Simplify, no matter what I did, would not even put supports in there. So let's see. That's not too bad. We'll call it battle damage. I'll see what Ashley says. But here is the first half of the helmet as it is, and it actually kind of fits on my head, believe it or not, which is pretty impressive. So the next step for this guy will be to rough sand it and then give it a couple of coats of Rust-Oleum filler primer, and we'll go from there in another video. So I'm going to conclude this video here with some time lapses of the printing. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next parts of this where I actually go into the finishing of this. Fingers crossed and all that. See you guys later.